Shalom, brothers and sisters in Hamashiach. I am Yakanina, and today we're going to be talking about the type of calendar that is used in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Was it a lunar calendar, a solar calendar, or a Roman calendar? We have several episodes to this series. Today is part 1. This message is being sponsored by the House of Shiloh. We're going to go over a quick overview of our table of contents. We have an exhaustive amount of topics to go through because we want to solidify this in your mind, in your hearts, what calendar you should be using and why you should be using it, and that it was used by our ancestors. So we have in our table of contents the origin of time, learning about the solar calendar, mathematical laws of Elohiym, the appointed times, the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilee, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Holy Bible, correcting new moon misconceptions, laws of the luminaries, the appointed times, the solar calendar that was used in the Old Testament, the solar calendar used in the New Testament, prophecy about changing times and laws, let my people go. You will find this is biblical in the book of Exodus. It may amaze you to find out why YAHUAH instructed Yasharel to be let go. It has something to do with observing the holy days. The next one is resetting the sacred calendar. Times and laws changed again. The Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar, creating holy days solely calendar, which is where we're going to actually show you how to do it step by step. And then at the end, key takeaways. The table of contents is a slight work in progress, so there may be some minor changes, but not much. Okay. So the overall focus of this lesson is 1, to determine which calendar we should use to calculate our dates for the holy days. 2, to biblically demonstrate the use of a sacred calendar or solar calendar throughout the Bible. 3, provide you with a step-by-step instruction on how to use the solar calendar for determining Yahuwah's appointed times or the holy days. And the last one, number 4, to highlight the reasons why the Roman calendar, the one we use today, was adjusted to closely synchronize with the solar calendar. Okay, so we're going to begin with the origin of time. This is not something I thought about much before putting this lesson together. It's about when did time begin? Do you know that we can find this written in the book of Genesis? Let's begin there. Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. And Elohiym said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. It was so. And Elohim made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Verse 17. And Elohim set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that this was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. So we see time being orchestrated in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, where you see it says, let the lights be for signs, for seasons, for days, for years. You need time to keep up with the number of days, and you need time to keep track of your years. And you also need time to keep track of your seasons. So time, or the origin of time, was created in Genesis, and it's for a reason. Let me surprise you for the reason. Let's look at the definition for this word seasons. The KJV didn't do a good demonstration of dissecting the Hebrew word into English, it was brought over as seasons, but when you look at it in the dictionary, you'll see something a bit more detailed, more telling. The Hebrew word is mo'ad or mo'adah, and some people pronounce it mo'ed, okay? It comes from the strong word H3259, and look at what it means. It means an appointment, a fixed time, specifically a festival. And when you hear this word festival, it comes to your mind. It should be the word feast. The word feast. So the lights in the heavens for the light by day and night are also for seasons in English, but in Hebrew it is Moadah or Moad, and it means festivals. Notice here where it says it means an assembly, specifically assembly, and definitely for congregating. So the lights in the heaven, the sun and the moon, are to help us to know when we are to assemble for our feasts, for our festivals, because it is an appointed time. And how do I know that this word seasons, that's in Genesis 1, means feast? Just look down at the bottom of the screen, Leviticus 23:2. Look at how it reads. Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feasts of YAHUAH. Notice this word feast is the same word for seasons, H4150. Same word. Is that surprising? I was shocked to find that Yahuwah had determined how we should calculate our feast from the very beginning, from Bereshit, from Genesis. Okay, so let's discuss some highlights. Time, or the mention of time, is in Genesis. It's in Genesis. That's the first mention of time. The creation of time existed before the creation of mankind. Did you know that? Did you notice that? Yahuwah determined in the beginning that the appointed feasts or the holy days are to be determined by his celestial calendar. The sun, moon, stars. Now here's something you should think about. Does the moon determine when the day begins? No, it doesn't. Okay, it's the sun. The sun determines when the day begins. And when the sun goes down, it determines the night. So does the moon determine when the night begins? No. When the sun sets, that is when the night begins. Does the sun determine when the day begins? Yes. The next day begins at sunset. The day begins from sunset and then until sunset. That's the day. Does the sun determine when the night begins? Yes. The night begins when the sun goes down. So the sun has a very important role in the celestial for determining our days and our night. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So I want to talk to you about the solar calendar and highlight what a solar calendar is because some people have never heard of it. So what is a solar calendar? It's a dating system whose days, the seasons, the dates, the years are determined by the movement and position of the sun and stars. As of today, the solar calendar is referred to as the celestial calendar, sacred calendar, Enoch's calendar, and in the book called Dead Sea Scrolls, it's called the Zadok calendar. Is the solar calendar a recent discovery? Of course not. Use of a solar calendar is not a recent discovery. It is used by other cultures even today, such as Egypt. It's called the Coptic calendar, and this calendar is still in use all over Egypt by farmers to keep track of the various agricultural seasons. The Persian calendar in Iran. This solar calendar is currently used officially in Iran and Afghanistan. In Persia, the Badi calendar. The Persian solar calendar was created by Ba'ab in the 1840s. And actually in Jerusalem, there was the Hebraic calendar. And this solar calendar was used by multiple kings as early as 400 BC, which we do plan on improving as the time moves forward in the lesson. So just a note, each of the above calendars are uniquely calculated, and they are not comparable to the calendar within our biblical accounts. For example, even though Egypt uses a solar calendar, sometimes their calendar has 13 months. In our calendar, there are only 12. Second point to note, the Book of Enoch and the solar calendar was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they are an ancient manuscript. The Dead Sea Scrolls are an ancient manuscript, and it was discovered back in 1947 and 1956 in 11 caves near Qumran on the northwestern shores of the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea Scrolls are more than 2,000 years old. This is before the time of Yahushua. So this is dating from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE. So the idea of a solar calendar is not a new concept. It is an ancient concept that has been lost to many of our people today. Okay, on the next slide. How many months are there in a solar calendar? As I mentioned before, the ancient Egyptian calendar had a 13th month called Thoth to keep the lunar calendar aligned with the solar and agricultural seasons. However, our Bible is clear that there are 12 months in a year. And below are some scriptures that you can refer to. 1 Chronicles 27. We learn that David made divisions of officers and leaders, men, according to the 12 months of the year. In 1 Kings 4, we learn that Solomon had officers for each month who provided food for him and his household, and that total number of officers were 12 officers for 12 months in a year. And there's another possible reference to the number of months in a year in the book of Revelations and the description of the tree of life, which describes 12 fruits according to the months of the year. That's in Revelation chapter 22, verse 2. And lastly, in the book of Enoch, it specifies that there were 12 leaders to divide the months. That's in Enoch chapter 82. So as we move forward, we should have the understanding that the solar calendar in our Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, is based upon a 12-month cycle, not 13. Okay? All right. Why is the solar calendar important to us? Did you know that the solar calendar is designed by YAHUAH to be a prophetic timeline of events? The way the solar calendar is constructed from antiquity is to be a prophetic timeline of major events for Yasharel. Did you know that each holy day listed on the solar calendar represents a milestone towards the past and towards the future salvation of Yasharel? This is why it's important that we are on Yahuwah's time schedule, on his calendar, so we can have a overview of things that were and things that will be. This is the main importance, not the only, but this is the main importance of the solar calendar. It highlights with pinpoint accuracy the 7 annual holy days, as each of these holy days is like a beat on a drum regarding the coming of Messiah and the salvation of Yasharel. And if you look carefully at past biblical major events, you will realize that each one of these major events that took place, it took place on one of the 7 holy days. And an example of that is in number 1, dealing with Passover. It was prophesied in the Old Testament that Messiah would come to give us life for Yasharel. We can read that in Exodus 12:21. Then Moses called for all the for all the elders of Israel, and said to them, draw out, take your lamb according to your families, kill the Passover. And then we see the fulfillment of that. We see the fulfillment of it. The death of Messiah did happen according to prophecy. The death of our Messiah took place at Passover, right before the time of Feast of Unleavened Bread. John 13:1. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Yahushua knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. So we had in the Old Testament the prophecy about the coming Messiah, our Passover lamb, and we see in John 13:1 the fulfillment of it. And it happened on the exact day that it was given to Moses in the book of Leviticus that this day is considered the day of Passover. It happened on that day, on the calendar that was instituted back then. Okay. 19 verse 31. Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath, because the Jews did not want the bodies left on the cross during the Sabbath. They asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. So the Jews understood that the day of unleavened bread, which is an actual holy day because Passover is not, it is not a holy day, but unleavened bread is. The first day and the second day of unleavened bread, those are your holy days, right? So the Jews wanted the body removed so that it would not be a problem for them. Okay, one moment. Okay, so our last scripture to solidify this thought is 1 Peter 2:24. Who is who his own self bare our sins in his own body, on the tree, that we, being dead to sins, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes ye were healed. So this shows you that Passover that Messiah was crucified on was the Passover that was foretold in the book of Exodus. The same time frame that Passover was taking place when the children of Israel left Egypt is the same one, same day that our Messiah was crucified on. Okay, so ask yourself these questions. Did Messiah need to teach his disciples about the existence of the Feast of Passover? No, they were already doing this before he arrived. But he did teach them regarding the real purpose of Passover. Messiah revealed that he was the Passover lamb that takes away the sins of the world, and he was crucified at the exact allotted, appointed time. Did Messiah's death coincidentally happen on Passover, or was it orchestrated to be on that day by divine hands? I believe right now you can see that it was Yahuwah's plan that Messiah would arrive on time and be ready to be the sacrificial lamb during the time of Passover. And the last one, last point. Also, Messiah is the living bread that came down from heaven, and he had no sin, unleavened bread. Therefore, he fulfilled that holy day also at the allotted time. Was that coincidental? No, it was not. It's because Yahuwah had already orchestrated the death of our Messiah from the beginning, which is why he said the lights in the heavens would be for seasons, for holy days, because he already had all the events planned out. I say that Yahuwah is the perfect project manager. He's managing this project called, called Earth and the people that are in it. So he knew when the time would come that he had orchestrated for this to happen. Okay. What about the Feast of Pentecost? Do you think that was coincidental? Did you know that it was prophesied that the set apart Ruach would be eventually poured out upon the nation of Yasharel? Did you know that? We can read that prophecy in the book of Joel, Joel 2:27. And ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am YAHUAH your Elohiym, and none else. And my people shall never be ashamed. Verse 28. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. So shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions, and also upon the servants and upon the handmaids. In those days I will pour out my spirit. This is the Old Testament. This is talking about the Feast of Pentecost. Did it happen just like the book of Joel prophesied? It did. And we can see that. We can see it in the book of Acts. Did you know that the Feast of Pentecost in the Renewed Testament, or the New Testament, some call it, was the fulfillment of the prophecy spoken of in the book of Joel? We can begin reading it in the book of Acts, chapter 2, verse 1. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Ghost, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, Yasharel, not the Jewish ones we see in Israel today, devout men. Where did they come from? Out of every nation under heaven. Now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together, and they were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed, and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue, wherein we were born? Because they were out of every nation, right? But bear in mind, it says there that in verse 5, there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, Yasharel. So the ones that were coming out of every nation was Yasharel. Yasharel was spread abroad, at least the northern kingdom. Next slide. Here is where they were from: Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and the dwellers in Mesopotamia, in Judea, Cappadocia, in Pontus, in Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, in Egypt, in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Hetes and Arabians. We do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of Elohiym. And they were all amazed, and were in doubt, saying one to another, What meaneth this? So now ask yourself these questions. What calendar was being used to unite multiple nations of Yasharel to come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Pentecost on the same day in Jerusalem? What calendar were they using? They didn't have cell phones back then. They didn't have texting. They didn't have Twitter, Instagram. So this means that they were all on the same calendar. What calendar was that? Have you thought about that? We're going to prove which one it is. How did they synchronize the exact month and day to show up in Jerusalem, which aligned to the same time frame during the Old Testament? Back in the Old Testament, when they were celebrating the Feast of Pentecost, this is the exact same time frame. How did they keep track of that time? What calendar did they use? We can safely say that it's not the Roman calendar that Yahuwah uses to show place his monumental events. He's not going to use the Roman calendar. So what calendar is that? That's something to prove and to think about, right? Okay, so some more things about the solar calendar. Did you know that the solar calendar is created by themes of seven, which are the divine mathematical laws that establish Yahuwah's feast days and Sabbaths? Again, these holy feast and Sabbath days are designated as divine appointments, and they are appointed times for monumental events, right? The holy days occur at dedicated times according to Yahuwah's solar calendar. And biblical proof of this is forthcoming. It's not just words, but we're going to demonstrate it. So therefore, the purpose of adhering to the solar calendar is to keep us, Yasharel, in alignment with Yahuwah's divine order, to keep us in sync with his divine rhythm, and to prepare us for appointed times of his visitation. Because remember, Yahuwah is an Elohiym of law and order. And an important thing to note is that ancient Yasharel was not a stranger to the solar calendar because it was used in their daily lives. And more will be shared about this. A little comment about the lunar calendar I want to highlight. Just as the solar calendar keeps us aligned with Yahuwah's schedule, observance of the lunar calendar will cause the months, the years, and thereby the holy days to shift over a period of time. And we're going to demonstrate this as we move forward. And it will bring us out of sync with Yahuwah's timeline of things. So using the lunar calendar brings about spiritual disorder. Why? Because it disrupts Yahuwah's set-apart days, as well as his divine timeline. Therefore, using this type of calendar is actually an act of disobedience because it cannot be synchronized with Yahuwah's divine schedule and rhythms that will form from the creation of the earth. Back in Genesis is when we saw this. It's important to note that the lunar calendar was used by many ancient cultures, and it was later adopted by Yasharel after the nation fell into sin. And it is still used today by the Jewish people to establish their feast days. The Jewish people to establish their feast days. Think about that. Okay. Let's talk about the solar calendar and the mathematical laws that surround it. Okay. Examples of Elohim's laws, for example, are gravitational laws, spiritual laws, universal laws, and they flawlessly operate in this earth. None of these laws are dynamic, they are static. For example, the sun remains 93 million miles from Earth. The moon remains about 239 million miles away from Earth. They are static, fixed, and the laws that govern them are non-negotiable. Any slight compromise or deviation could cause earthly catastrophes such as tidal waves, as the moon controls its tides. And the same thing will happen if the sun moves even a couple inches closer to Earth, we would burn. So the laws that govern where the sun sits in the celestial are static. They are static laws. The same is true with Yahuwah's mathematical laws that govern the sacred calendar. Tampering with the mathematical laws that govern the solar calendar brings about errors when calculating the holy days. And this will result in putting you out of sync with the timing and the will of Yahuwah, causing you to celebrate your holy events on unsanctified or unsanctioned days. It is Yahuwah that determines when a day is set apart or sanctified. And if we do it outside of when He has determined it, it is unsanctioned. That means we will be out of sync with what He has in store for us. Okay. So what are the annual mathematical laws of Elohim? Number one, A year consists of a total of 364 days, a solar calendar year, whereas the Gregorian calendar, the Roman calendar, it has 365.25 or 366, I think, depending on whether there's a leap year involved. But the solar calendar is an exact 364 days. Point two, a year is divided into 52 perfect weeks. If you take the 364 and divide it by 7, you will get 52 perfect weeks. What I mean by perfect weeks is that there's no remainder. It's not 52.49 or 52.56, it's 52 even weeks. Number 3, a year has 4 seasons. And we already know that, I believe. We know that the seasons are spring, there's summer, fall, and winter. So a year has 4 seasons or 4 quarters. A year is 12 months, which we mentioned previously, not 13 months, 12 months. Number 5, there are 4 seasons, and each season is comprised of 3 months. Each season is comprised of 3 months, 13 weeks, or 91 days. And number 6, there are a total of 91 days in each season, and this is how it's computed. One moment. So the 91 days in each season, 30, 30, 30, is actually the way it goes. And then you add one. You add one. That one that you add is an intercalary day. And we're going to talk about that in more detail as we move forward. So it's 30, 30, 30, and add one, or 30, 30, 31. And that equals 91 days. So every season has 91 days. If you multiply 91 days times 4 seasons, you get 364 days. So I want you to see that there are some fixed calculations for the calendar and that they do not deviate from this method. Okay. Using this mathematical system ensures that Yahuwah's sacred times, his holy days, and his Sabbaths are established on the correct days. And this keeps us in alignment with his schedule. This is important. This is one of the main reasons we're going to go through such great detail explaining all of this, because we want you to be sure that your holy days are in alignment with the schedule that he set up back in Genesis chapter 1. Okay, the mathematical laws. Did you know that the solar calendar cannot exist without the allotted 7 days in 1 week? It cannot exist. The number 7 is an integral part of the solar year, and the theme of sevens are evidenced in the KJV Bible. It's also in the book of Jubilees. It's in 1 Enoch and some of the other so-called apocryphal materials. Below are some of the examples of the number 7 that can be seen on the solar calendar. The creation week consists of 7 days. Number 2, every 7th day is a Sabbath. Number 3, the Feast of Unleavened Bread lasts 7 days. Number 4, there are 7 annual holy days. And number 5, the 364 solar days divided by 7 is 52. Or if you take 364 and divide it by 52, you get 7. So you can see that the theme of 7 is important to the solar calendar. All right. So what I want to show you is how the theme of 7 is even indicated on the menorah. And the menorah, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's read. Exodus chapter 25, verse 31. And thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold, of beaten work shall the candlestick be made. His shaft, his branches, his bowl, his knops, His flowers shall be of the same. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches of the candlestick out of the one side, 3 branches out of the candlestick out of the other side. 3 bowls made like unto almonds with a knot and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls made like almonds in the other branch, with a knot and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick, and in the candlestick shall be 4 bowls made like unto almonds, with their knops and their flowers. Verse 35. And there shall be a knot under 2 branches of the same, and a knot under 2 branches of the same, and a knot under 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that proceed out of the candlestick. Verse 21. This is chapter 27. In the tabernacle of the congregation without the veil, which is before the testimony, Aaron and his sons shall order it from evening till morning before Yahuwah. It shall be a statute forever unto their generation on behalf of the children of Yasharel. So you notice that the menorah has 6 branches, 3 on one side, 3 on the other side. The branch in the middle is the candlestick, but there still are a total of 7 when you count it. Just like there are 7 days in a week, there are 7 candles in the menorah. 3 branches on one side, 3 branches on the opposite side, and then the centerpiece, the candlestick itself. Okay. So you see the theme of 7 again. The years, there's 364 divided by 7. And I know that I'm repeating this more than once because repetition is how we learn. Even Yahuwah repeats himself throughout scripture in various ways for our learning, for things to be solidified in our minds. So the years is 364 divided by 7. The Sabbath is every 7 days. See, the menorah has 7. The feasts are a total of 7 feast days. The Jubilees, for example, is 7 years times 7, and then you add a day. The Sabbath of years, the moon rests every 7 years. And even Pentecost, the holy days such as Pentecost are calculated as 7 weeks times 7, which is 49, and then you add a day. So the theme of 7 is built throughout the solar calendar, and our holy days are built on that, and our menorah is built up that way too. So now I want to show you that these times that we are talking about were appointed. They were appointed from Genesis 1. And I want to show you that the scripture tells us that they are appointed. We can begin reading this. Okay. Is the timing of things important to Yahuwah? Absolutely. He predetermined the appointed times for all of the Bible's major biblical events. Look at this in Isaiah. This is what Yahuwah is saying about himself. Remember the former things of old, for I am Al, and there is none else. I am Elohiym, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning. And when did Yahuwah begin to tell us about the end? In the beginning, in Bereshit, in Genesis, and from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So let's review some scriptures that demonstrate Yahuwah has meticulously and carefully planned the appointed times for his pivotal events to manifest. And the reason he has done this is because Yahuwah is time sensitive. Let's begin in Genesis 18. This is a discussion with Abram. Is anything too hard for Yahuwah? At the time appointed, I will return unto you, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. So notice that Isaac could not be born until it was the time appointed on Yahuwah's calendar. And remember, the calendar was set up in Genesis 1. It was called seasons. It's called days, called years, right? That was set up in Genesis chapter 1. Okay, Genesis 21, verses 1 through 2. And Yahuwah visited Sarah as he had said. And Yahuwah did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bore Abram a son in his old age when? At the set time of which Elohiym had spoken to him. So Yahuwah had already predetermined when Isaac would be born. It would stand to reason that we also be predetermined when Yahusha would be born and when he would die. These events are set up on the solar calendar where it depicts and determines the holy days, and the holy days are past events, and they foreshadow future events to come. Here's a discussion with Moses. You shall therefore guard this ordinance in his appointed time from year to year. This ordinance is a law that is saying the holy days are appointed. They are not to be determined when we want them to be, but when Yahuwah has allotted that time for. And we are to do this perpetually, right? Listen to this discussion by Apostle Paul that explains appointed time. It's in Galatians 4, verses 1 through 2. Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, differs nothing from a servant, though he be Adonai of all, but is under tutors and governors until when? The time appointed. I'm continuing to show you these various scriptures that the appointed times were intricately woven into the calendar, the holy days of Yahuwah, that are determined by the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky, not by the Roman Gregorian calendar. Here's another explanation of Paul concerning time. Galatians 4, 4 through 5. When the fullness of the time was come, Elohim sent forth his son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. When was this done? In the fullness of time, when the time had reached its maximum number that was allotted to it, not before and not after. So Yahuwah is time sensitive. I want us to understand that because we need to be diligent in trying to discern when the holy days begin and when they end, because Yahuwah is sensitive about that. Now let's look at some scriptures that demonstrate that Yahuwah has meticulously and carefully planned his allotted events. The Lamb Passover. Then Moses called for all elders of Israel and said to them, draw out, take you a lamb according to your families, kill the Passover, take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, strike the lintel and the two side posts with the blood that is in the basin. None of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning, for Yahuwah will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, Yahuwah will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your homes, your houses, to smite you. And ye shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever. Notice that Yahuwah says, this is when this event is going to take place. Passover. Not before, not during Feast of Fruits, First Fruits. It's not the last week of unleavened bread. This is going to happen during Passover. And it will stay this way. This is a law. It's an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever. Are you catching that? Time sensitive. Yahuwah is time sensitive. Okay. And now we have Yahuwah, Yahusha, our Messiah. He's the human Passover. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, it's written, purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Hamashiach, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep this feast. He's referring to the feast of unleavened bread, not with the old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Apostle Paul is celebrating unleavened bread more than 1,000 years from the time when it was instituted, when the children of Israel left Egypt, when they were in the wilderness. And he is on the exact same day and time. What calendar is he using? That's the question you should continue to ask yourself. What calendar? Okay, moving on. I want to show you in the book of Enoch. We're going to use this one as our first corroborating witness, right? Because it says in the scriptures, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. So I want to show you that the solar calendar is discussed in the book of Enoch. Although you see it mentioned in Genesis, it's not called a solar calendar. Yahuwah calls it the lights and the firmament, the sun and the moon and the stars for determining the days, the seasons, the years, the months, right? But it's also mentioned in the book of Enoch. So here's our witness. It's in chapter 82. And now, my son Methuselah, all these things I relate to thee and write for thee, and I have revealed to thee everything, and have given thee books concerning them all. Preserve, my son Methuselah, the books from the hand of thy father, and give them to the generations of the world. Verse 2. Wisdom I have given thee and thy children and those who will be thy children, that they give it to their children, the generations to eternity. Namely, this wisdom above their thoughts. This means don't do what it is that you think you should do. Do what is written. Verse 3. And those who understand it will not sleep, but will hear with their ears, that they may learn this wisdom, and will please those who eat, and it will please those who eat of it more than good food. Verse 4. Happy are all the just. Happy all those who walk in the paths of justice and have no sin like the sinners. What kind of sin is it? In the counting of all their days, in which the sun goes through the heavens, entering and departing from the gate each time 30 times, together with the heads of the thousands of this order of the stars, together with the 4 that are added and separate between the 4 portions of the year, which they lead and enter with them 4 days. Verse 5. And on their account men will be at fault, and will not count them in the reckoning of the whole world, but men will be mistaken and will not know them exactly. So what is being said here? What he's saying is the way, and we're going to go into greater detail later, the way that it will come to pass, men will not count the months, 30 days per month. They will not. They will not allow for the 4 intercalary days, and I will demonstrate those to you as we move forward. And then what you've heard and what you're going to see, hopefully they will begin to complement each other to draw a complete picture in your mind, right? So he says men will forget to do this and they're going to reckon the time wrong and they will be mistaken. This was a prophecy written in the book of Enoch about the times to come. And did it happen? It sure did. But now we're trying to find our way back to that. We're relearning what we once knew many, many, many years ago. Okay. All right. Verse 6. For they belong to the reckoning of the year and are exactly marked forever. These are the intercalary days, the 4 days that he was talking about being added. One is in the first portal, and one in the third, and one in the fourth, and one in the sixth. And the year is completed in 364 days. If you multiply 30 times 12, what do you get? 360, right? And then you add 4 days, which are the intercalary days. You get a total of 364. I know I keep repeating it because I don't want you to forget. We are going to discuss these days and how they are computed in greater detail as we move forward. We're going over the basics first, the foundation, and we're going to continue to build on it until we actually come to where we construct the calendar and put it together. Okay, verse 7. For this account is true and the computation exact as here recorded, since everything concerning the luminaries, the months, and the festivals, and the years, and the days, Uriel has shown to me and revealed it as he was ordered by Yahuwah of the whole creation of the world and about the host of heaven. Verse 9. And this is the order of the stars that set in their places and in their times and in their festivals and in their months. And these are the names of those who lead them, who watch that they enter in their times and in their order and in their occasions and in their months and in their powers and in their positions. There are 4 leaders, which are the 4 intercalary days, who divide the 4 portions or the 4 seasons of the year. They enter first. After them, the 12 leaders, 12 months in a year of the orders, who separate the months and the year into 364 days, not 365 point something or 366, it's 364, together with the heads of the thousands who divide the days. For the 4 intercalary days, these are the leaders who separate the 4 parts of the years. What are the 4 parts of the year? Spring, summer, fall, and winter. So this is what the book of Enoch is testifying. I hope you're following me. One moment, please. Now we have the book of Jubilees, which is also going to be a second witness for us that Yahuwah determines the holy days by the sun, the moon, and the stars, which are written in Genesis chapter 1. The book of Jubilees is going to point it out also. Let's begin reading. We're in chapter 2. This is verse 8. And on the 4th day, he created the sun and the moon and the stars, and set them in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon all the earth, and to rule over the day and the night, and divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days, and for Sabbaths, and for months, and for feasts, and for years, and for Sabbaths of years, and for jubilees, and for all seasons of the years. Here's what it didn't say. It didn't say Elohim appointed the moon. It didn't say that. So yes, the moon has its role, but it's not for determining the Sabbaths, the months, nor our feast days. We saw this discussion in chapter 82 in the book, chapter 2 in the book of Jubilees. We saw it in Genesis, right at the bottom. Where did we see a discussion about the creation of the two great lights? Right in Genesis chapter 1. Elohim said, let there be lights, right? In the firmament of the heavens, to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. So the book of Jubilee, chapter 2, is complementing in our KJV Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 16. 15 says, let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. So we can see that the book of Jubilee is a good witness for what was written in Genesis chapter 1. Okay. So what I want to show you and point out is in the notes at the bottom. The sun is appointed to determine the days, the months, the years, and the seasons. Does the moon have an assigned job? It does. What time frame or season uses the moon to determine a season? What's the job of the moon besides ruling the night? It's the sun and moon are used to determine the spring equinox. On that day, we have a time of equal light where the sun rules and equal night where the moon rules. The equinox is determined by the equal time. Is the time equal to the last second? No, it's not. It may be 12 hours and 1 minute and 11 hours and 59 seconds or something like that. It's off by a negligible amount. So it's called equal day and equal night. This happens twice a year, the spring equinox and the fall equinox. So the spring equinox, when this happens, this is when we use this time frame to begin our calendar. And I will prove that also as we move forward. But I just wanted you to see that the moon does have a role. It's just not for determining the years, the months, or the days. Jubilee tells us very clearly what it's for, what the sun is for, and what the moon is for. Let's keep reading in the book of Jubilees. We're in chapter 6, verse 32. It says, command you the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days. This is important, Yasharel. This is important that we do not count our months or our days in a year according to the Roman calendar. When we are setting and establishing our holy days, we have to use YAHUAH's calendar, 364 days. And these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts, for everything will fall out in them according to their testimony. Look at what it's just said right there. Everything will happen at these appointed times that is written according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. Verse 33, but if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order, and they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new months and the seasons and the Shabbats, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. Are you getting that Yahuwah has all the years ordered since Genesis? He has the seasons ordered since Genesis, and that he used the sun and the moon, the stars to um, bring about that order since Genesis, right? So I want you to note that to dislodge the years is the same as celebrating the holy days out of season, or choosing the wrong year to celebrate a holy day, such as the Jubilee. The Jubilee is every 49 years, add one. You can't just celebrate Jubilee any year you want. You can't say, well, I'll have a Jubilee every year. You can't do that. It has to be done according to how he tells us to compute it. And one more thing I'd like to highlight is to neglect their ordinances. It means to disregard the law that governs the appointed time, to disregard the law that governs the observance of these holy days. And if you're disregarding the laws that Yahuwah put into place, is that not sin? Knowingly or unknowingly, is that not sin? Think about it. Okay. Verse 35. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto you, and it is not of my own devising, for the book is written before me. He's saying, I'm reading this. And on the heavenly tablets, the division of the days is ordained, lest they forget what? The feasts. These are the feasts of the covenant, and they walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance. So the feasts also are celebrated by Gentiles, but in a different way. They use a different calendar. They use a different method of computation as well. Yahuwah is asking us not to do this according to the way they do it. Verse 36, for there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon and how it disturbs the seasons, because it comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. Have you ever noticed that? If you don't begin to plot it, you won't notice that the moon comes in about 10 days too soon. You won't notice that the moon annually is about 354 days, whereas the sun is 364. And the difference between the two is 10. Okay, now we have another witness. This one is called the Dead Sea Scrolls. Let's see what the Dead Sea Scrolls have to say about using the solar calendar for computing the sacred gatherings. Here we go. The Dead Sea Scrolls are the collected writings of the Essenes. It was discovered in the caves near Qumran in 1946 by an Arab shepherd boy who took several of the manuscripts to a black market antiquities dealer in Bethlehem. As the fragments and scrolls came on the market, they were distributed to an international team of scholars for translation and preservation. They included over 225 biblical Hebrew texts, copies of older apocalyptic texts, their own apocalyptic views, manuals, commentaries, hymns, prayers, horoscopes, and curses. Please don't let that word horoscopes throw you off. We're not talking about reading the horoscopes as is done today to determine if you'll have a good day or a bad day. Horoscopes is looking at the stars, right? And that is something that our Hebrew people did. Remember the wise men that went to King Herod and said, "We are following the star of the one who was born king." Remember when you read in one of the apocrypha books how it says when Abraham was born, the wise men, the it was not the wise men, it was Nimrod's men. They saw the star and reported it to Nimrod and say, "Yeah, this Abram that was born is going to be a problem because we saw what his star did." So I just wanted you to take note that this is not about determining what your horoscope is going to be for today or for tomorrow. The Essenes were members of a Zadok priesthood that flourished in Palestine from about the 2nd century BC into the end of the 1st century AD. The Essenes kept the solar calendar, or they call it the sacred calendar, and they kept the holy days according to the way it was done by Adam and up to Moses and even King David. The Essenes were able to come up with the exact year that the Messiah's life would be taken according to the books of the prophets, and they believed that Yahusha was that Messiah. What calendar were they using? It wasn't the Roman calendar. It wasn't the lunar calendar. It was the solar calendar. And you can read that in greater detail in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay. The Essenes were also called the sons of light, while Belial and his company, they're called the sons of darkness. So the Essenes, at the end of time, would engage in an end-time catastrophic war with the enemies of Yasharel. The enemies of Yasharel are called the sons of darkness. And we are coming up on this end-time war where light is going to be battling darkness, or good is going to be battling with evil. The Essenes used a solar calendar that was based upon 30 days a month for 12 months. This calendar thought to have existed in ancient Mesopotamia, to which were added 4 cardinal days, or called intercalary days, at the equinoxes, spring, summer, fall, winter, and it totaled to be 364 days. We're going to have a more in-depth discussion regarding the solar calendar. You'll see this as we move forward in the lesson. I want to keep reminding you that it is coming. We're just building a foundation. Okay. If you want to refer to the links where I got the information from, please take note at the bottom. Feel free to screenshot it. Okay. We have another witness. This is our 4th corroborating witness. And we're going to stop here for the sake of time and pick it up in part 2. And then we'll discuss this in greater detail. Shalom. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that you come back to continue the lesson on what solar calendar is used in the Old Testament and the New Testament, because I believe you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Shalom. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit the like button if you liked this lesson. Shalom.